this meeting to order. Welcome to meeting number 48 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Access to Information, Privacy and Ethics. Pursuant to the order of reference of Thursday, February 12th, 2026, Section 14.1 of the Lobbying Act and the motion adopted by the committee on Wednesday, September 17th, 2025, the committee is resuming the statutory review of the Lobbying Act. And before I introduce our witness, just to remind that committee members may ask questions in either English or French, and make sure you have the earpiece in if you need it. I'd like to welcome our first witness today from the Center for Israel and Jewish Affairs. Dylan Hanley is here. He's the Senior Vice President of Public Affairs. Mr. Hanley, you have up to 5 minutes to address the committee. Go ahead, sir.
Okay.
You're good.
Soon the microphone will work. Mr. Chair, members of the committee, thanks for the opportunity to appear before you today. My name's Dylan Hanley. I'm the Senior Vice President for Public Affairs at ETHI, the advocacy agent of Jewish Federations of Canada, representing hundreds of thousands of Jewish Canadians. Je me félicite de l'occasion qui...
I welcome this opportunity to address you as you undertake your statutory review of the Lobbying Act.
It's all the French that I'll attempt. Apologies for it. Working to make sure my kids are properly bilingual. At its core, our concern is not about any single provision of the Act. It's about whether Parliament's intent, clearly expressed through legislation and committee recommendations, is being upheld, or effectively overridden through administrative interpretation by the Commissioner of Lobbying. We have concerns in two areas: sponsored travel of parliamentarians and parliamentary internship programs. First, sponsored travel. Parliament allowed sponsored travel because it recognized its value. Public office holders benefit from direct, first-hand exposure to complex global issues they're asked to weigh in on. ETHI's missions to Israel are structured, nonpartisan, and educational. Participants engage with Israeli, Palestinian, and Canadian officials, as well as experts, journalists, and civil society. However, the current interpretation advanced by the Office of the Commissioner of Lobbying has created a clear contradiction. Parliament clearly permits sponsored travel under Section 15 of the Conflict of Interest Code, but the regulatory approach effectively prevents participation by including sponsored travel under gifts with a $200 limit. In practice, this has largely nullified the exemption Parliament deliberately created, undermining the will of parliamentarians. We are already seeing the impact. According to the Ethics Commissioner's most recent annual report, only 15 MPs participated in sponsored international travel in 2025, the lowest number in 15 years. Second, parliamentary internships, where the contradiction is even clearer. In 2002, ETHI established a multi-partisan parliamentary internship program to give young Canadians first-hand experience working on Parliament Hill. The objective was simple: to expose participants to public service and inspire future careers in political life. In October 2018, the Ethics Commissioner issued an advisory opinion stating that interns placed by third parties constitute a benefit under the Code, despite the Code making no explicit reference to interns. The following month, the Lobbyist Commissioner issued a ruling concurring with the Ethics Commissioner that providing paid interns to MPs free of charge is a gift or benefit. It's also considered a gift in the context of Rule 10 of the Lobbyist Code of Conduct. In compliance with the rules, ETHI immediately suspended the program. But Parliament has since spoken directly on this issue. In 2022, the Standing Committee on Procedure and House Affairs, whose report was concurred on by the House, stated clearly that parliamentary internships are invaluable opportunities and recommended that interns be excluded from the definition of benefit. And yet, despite that clear expression of parliamentary will, the outcome remains unchanged in practice. While the Ethics Commissioner has moved toward allowing internships, the Lobbying Commissioner's interpretation continues to prevent organizations subject to the Lobbying Act from offering them. Taken together, these cases point to a broader issue. The activities themselves are legitimate, educational, and nonpartisan. Parliament has either explicitly permitted them or, in the case of internships, clearly indicated its intent to do so. Yet regulatory interpretations made them impractical. This is not simply stricter oversight, it's divergence from Parliament's intent. We're strongly supportive of both safeguards and full transparency. For sponsored travel, public disclosure and detailed reporting of participants and costs. And for internships, a clear exemption for sponsored interns alongside public disclosure of the sponsoring organization, the intern, and the duration of placement. Transparency can address concerns without eliminating the programs themselves. In closing, Parliament made its intent clear, both through legislation and through committee recommendations adopted by the House. We're concerned that current interpretations have, in effect, overridden Parliament's intent. We respectfully urge this committee to restore alignment between Parliament's will and regulatory practice. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hanley. We're going to start with our first round of questioning. We're going to go to Mr. Barrett for 6 minutes. Go ahead, Mr. Barrett.
Well, thanks very much. I'll note that in, I think it was 2022, I did go on the sponsored travel by CEJA, and that informs my view of the range of issues that were covered during the experience, but also on the subject of sponsored travel. Do you think that it would be, and I think that at the core, the most important thing is the transparency that comes from the disclosures that are made thereafter. It's important that sponsored travel is reported. It's important that the reporting is transparent, and that, for example, it's not necessary for me to say that I took that trip with my spouse, because the total value, the details, the dates, they're public. And so I think that's important, as is the case with all lobbying activity. But when it comes to the question of whether or not it's a gift, do you think it would simplify the matter if members were given through the House of Commons, through the Consolidated Revenue Fund, budgets to engage in this kind of travel, be it with or without the coordination of third-party organizations like yours, for example?
Sure. Look, the root of our concern is the opportunity for MPs to be able to go experience and hear from folks on the ground. I think that would be an option that probably would make sense for Parliament to look at least in terms of increasing the funds that are available to MPs. But again, I think through transparency, everything that takes place is a matter of the public record, and we'd like to see it restored. And we think that folks like yourself, that was before my time back at CEJA, hopefully have benefited from the opportunity to learn and gather facts on the ground.
Yeah, and I have colleagues who've participated in sponsored travel, parliamentarians representing all parties in the House, who have brought back different experiences as the result of sponsored travel. And some organizations, of course, are captured by the change made or the interpretation made by the commissioner. CEJA is one of those. Some are not. So government-funded organizations or governments are not captured by the legislation or the interpretation made by the commissioner. So we agree that transparency is the most important piece, that the reporting that it's available to the public is important. What would you say to concerns about the risk of foreign interference? So some would say that perhaps in the case of CEJA, well, what's the straight line distance between the government of Israel and the member of parliament who's accepting the travel?
Sure. I mean, the line is stark. We don't speak for or at the direction of or in any kind of coordination with the government of Israel. We represent Jewish Canadians, hundreds of thousands of them, through Jewish federations across the country. The Jewish people have a unique, strong bond to the land of Israel, and that is what we're looking at when we're hosting these sorts of delegations. I'd also note that sponsorship by foreign governments is allowed. So.
Right, and so I know that that's sometimes one of the questions raised about sponsored travel, whereas sponsored travel, like a government, which is publicly disclosed, like the Economic Office for Taiwan, it's for a legitimate purpose, and that transparency exists. For my part, on the trip that I took with CEJA, I did the things that you referenced. I had the opportunity to meet with Palestinian officials, with Israeli officials, with Canadian officials in the region, and I think I benefited greatly from that. What do you think the effect is on other organizations? Results Canada is an organization you'd be familiar with, sponsoring travel to countries in Africa. Colleagues from all parties who've taken part in that. What do you think the loss is to the public discourse in the absence of a change that would either allow the permissibility of these trips or budgetary funding from the House for these trips? What do you think is lost as a result of that?
I think the loss is in Member of Parliament's connections to Canadian civil society, but also global issues. I think, when we're talking about clamping down on risks, we're talking about risk mitigation. There's no such thing as zero risk, right? When you buy an alarm for your house, et cetera, there's not zero risk that's there. The transparency and accountability provisions that we have in this country are the strongest, as far as I know, amongst any peer country, the most stringent. And so I think here this is a balance between ensuring MPs have the ability to connect with the issues that they're going to be confronting as MPs and also connect with Canadian civil society. So I think it's very important.
Thank you, Mr. Hanley. Mr. Barrett, Madame Lapointe, pour 6 minutes.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président. Merci d'être avec nous aujourd'hui.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for being with us today. I'm going to be speaking to you in French. I participated in a trip in 2018 and I enjoyed it. You talked about things that are unique. In my riding, there is a Jewish community. They've been there since 1964. There are about 3,000 of them, 350 families. It's very interesting. And they're not linked with Israel, but rather with the city of New York. And I met with them, and we met with officials during the trip and members of parliament, Palestinians. We wanted to see why there was an organization that represents all of the different Jewish communities, because I understood that it's not very homogenous and they're very orthodox in my riding. And there was a program recently for community safety, given the concerning increase in anti-Semitism in Boisbriand. This didn't happen in the last 5 years. This hasn't happened because that community dresses differently, and the people at Boisbriand, the people of Boisbriand have always been aware of this community. And we saw an increase of anti-Semitism throughout the country, and I imagine that your organization was able to work directly with the public safety minister and departmental officials, and that you were able to share your concerns and speak to programs like the one I mentioned. So the program for community safety, for example. Would you say that this is an example of the importance of a lobbying regime that is transparent and accessible, that allows organizations like CEJA to share their concerns and to have their voices heard and to create policies that help protect vulnerable communities? My community received additional funding in order to be better protected. Can you speak to my question, please?
Sure. And apologies for not being able to respond in French. So 100% the Canada Community Security Program funding that was announced in the Spring Economic Statement, and another tranche specifically for the Jewish community earlier in the spring, is of significant importance to protecting the Jewish community in a very difficult time. For the last 3 years and escalating in the last year, we've seen synagogues surrounded. We've seen, schools and places of worship shot at, et cetera. And this is one of the responses. The other one is Bill C-9, which we hope to see brought forward that will stop protest around places of worship and hopefully better protect Canadians. What we need to see more of still is enforcement of the law, and we've been calling on the federal government to utilize the federal convening power to convene other levels of government and see greater enforcement. And we're hopeful that over time we will see this. And of course, we work very closely with Minister Ananda Sangri and again, police forces across the country, provincial governments across the country to try to make sure our community is kept safe.
Merci. Concernant la recommandation numéro 1,
Regarding recommendation 1 by the Commissioner, should there be a distinction between an in-house lobbyist and a consultant lobbyist? Do you support a process of registration by default?
I don't think we have any issues being registered as lobbyists, and the distinction between in-house and outside. Obviously, I'm sure you've had representatives of private sector business and others coming in and talking about all of that. And again, I think that we're perfectly happy to be registered and in full compliance and 100% transparent about all the communications that we have with government.
merci. Puis concernant la recommandation 2,
Regarding recommendation 2, I believe that you've looked into the different recommendations by the Commissioner.
Yes.
oui, OK. La recommandation 2 propose de
Recommendation 2 proposes amending the legislation so that board members are deemed to be employees of the organization or corporations on whose boards they sit. Can you speak to the impact that the recommendation would have?
Listen, I think, again, that when you're talking about regulating lobbying, which is an important thing to do, transparency, accountability are important. Again, it's an exercise in risk mitigation. I think for us as a community organization, and I would imagine for plenty of other nonprofits and charities, I can't speak to private companies because I haven't yet been invited to sit on a private company board, maybe one day. These folks are volunteers by and large, and the idea, the word registered lobbyist may instill hesitation in people to participate in those activities. So I would say we would be not in favor of seeing that regulation brought into place. And again, I would say so long as the organization is following the rules and regulations that are put out there, which again go further than in virtually any other Western democracy.
Merci beaucoup.
Merci, Madame Lapointe. Monsieur Barcelot-Duval.
Thank you, Ms. Lapointe. Mr. Barcelot-Duval, you have 6 minutes. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Hanley, for being with us today. Before I start, I would like to mention, and you raised the increase of crimes against the Jewish community, and I wanted to let you know that I share your concerns with that. And we've seen certain changes proposed by the Bloc, banning certain hate comments because of religious beliefs, and this has been helpful. I know that this isn't directly linked to what we're talking about today, but I'm sure that as a representative of the Jewish community, you advocate for the rights of your members and the people that you represent, and you follow the rules in doing so. But there are organizations that don't follow the rules. They don't declare their lobbying. They're not registered. And yet, those organizations could be working against your interests, and you're following the rules. And when there's a complaint, and I saw a specific file regarding Drivers Inc., and there was an organization that lobbied the government and Liberal members, and it was not declared, and I shared a complaint with the commissioner, and she said that she couldn't respond whether or not she would be investigating. I find that wild, that there is no accountability, that we don't know what happens with a complaint. Would you agree that the lobbying commissioner can inform us of investigations that are ongoing and that we know how these investigations ended so that we can trust her work? Because if we don't know what she's doing, we have no information regarding the rigor, and we don't know if the rules protecting people against lobbying are really being implemented.
Thanks very much for your recognition and concern for the community. On this particular issue, I'm not familiar with the Drivers Inc. case, so I can't comment on it directly. The one thing I would say is that a move towards greater transparency in terms of investigations would also raise a hesitation about the weaponization of a complaints process. And for us, you know, we've seen that in other fora utilized against our community. And so I think there's a balance to be had there. We don't have a specific position on that piece of what's in front of you, but I would say there's a balance there between privacy and, again, creating perverse incentives that
OK. Bien, je vous remercie beaucoup pour votre réponse. Ça m'amène justement.
Thank you. And last time I was here at committee, I had the opportunity to put a motion on notice, and now I will be able to table it, and I will reread it. Whereas, in the context of the study on the Drivers Inc. Model conducted by the Standing Committee of Transport, Infrastructure and Communities, the Canada Truck Operators Association is the only organization to have expressed explicit support for this model, whereas the CTOA is the only organization to have refused to provide its membership list to the TRAN committee as part of the study, whereas numerous Liberal elected officials and ministers have repeatedly appeared with members of the CTOA at public events or lobbying activities, including the organization's founding gala in 2023, whereas a Liberal minister prohibited the use of the term Driver Inc. at the request of the CTOA, whereas the chair of the TRAN committee attended a C2OA event where he was featured as one of the two headliners, whereas Tejpreet Dulat, the C2OA's spokesperson, has been involved with the Liberal Party of Canada since 2015 and played a direct role in electing Mark Carney as Member of Parliament for Nepean and as Prime Minister, and whereas about 10 active members of the C2A have contributed to the LPC's election fund by providing over $100,000 to the party since 2015, that the Standing Committee on Access to Information, Privacy and Ethics undertake a study on the links between the Liberal Party of Canada and the C2OA. Chair, perhaps I will take some time to explain the motion. Just one moment, please, Mr. Barsalou-Duval. The motion is in order. I want to ask our witness to stay for a few minutes, if he can. And we're going to discuss your motion. Mr. Barsalou-Duval, I have a list. Mr. Hardy, Ms. Chagger, Mr. Barrett, and you can go ahead and explain your motion. Thank you very much, Chair. I have tabled this motion today because at the Transport Committee, there have been many issues, and we discovered the issue with Drivers Inc. And that was thanks to a study that we carried out. And through that study, and perhaps people don't know this phenomenon and what Drivers Inc. is, so I can explain it to you briefly. Drivers Inc. integrates somebody who should be an employee of an organization as a subcontractor instead of hiring them as an employee. In using that strategy, it allows for not paying for EI and leave, which should be given. We don't have to pay into a retirement fund, and we don't have to take money aside for taxes. It doesn't cover workplace accidents as well, and so the subcontractor is responsible for their actions and any injuries. And so overtime is not paid either because they are a subcontractor. No minimum wage either. So they could be working very hard. There's no guarantee regarding how much they're going to be paid. No guarantee that there's work because they are a subcontractor. So you just stop giving someone work. This creates a system whereby the employees, well, they are victims. They are very disadvantaged compared to someone who is employed. And so this represents 30, 40, 50% even for a difference in costs, and they don't have to pay taxes or declare their taxes. And so this is extremely problematic, especially for companies that follow the rules and employ their drivers. This opens the door to abuse and exploitation. When we're talking about abuse and exploitation, well, it has to do with working hours and not respecting a minimum number of hours, and it leads to extreme fatigue, and extreme fatigue leads to accidents. And when we look at the statistics, and if we're dealing with the stats of collisions with these vehicles, 136 people died, 376 in 2022, in 23, 389, so an increase every year. And in Quebec, it's been a 35% increase in deaths for 2023-24. So in 1 year, an increase of 35% for accidents involving these trucks. The Drivers Inc. system leads to other problems, trucks that are not maintained, truckers that are not well trained, underpaid, migrant workers who will be abused, and there will be they won't be respecting the hours worked. There were a lot of cases where people were caught driving for 50 hours. And this is unfortunately something that's more and more current. If we look at the data for truckers, incorporated truckers, StatsCan said that in Canada in 2015 there were 65,000. In 2025 there are over 100,000. In Quebec it was about 9,000 in 2015 and now 11,000. If we look at Ontario, there were 27,000 in 2015. In 2025, there's 53,000. So if we look at the more recent data between 2020 and 2025, we went from 33,000 to 53,000, an increase of 20,000. The number is almost doubled in Ontario for the number of drivers. And in 5 years, that 20,000 person increase compared to Quebec, there were 8,000 more in Quebec. In Canada, we're talking about an additional 26,000. So 20 out of 26,000 additional drivers incorporated are from Ontario. And we heard from Mr. McKinnon, who said many times that it's a Quebec issue that needs to be solved in Quebec. But we see in the data that it is a problem that is quite significant in Ontario. 85% of this increase comes from Ontario. I think that is quite clear. If we compare these incorporated drivers to those who are employed in the transport sector, we'll better understand the situation. In 2025, there was 101 incorporated compared to 200,000 employees. So 200,000 people who were employees in Canada versus 100,000 who were incorporated. And so 1 in 3 people driving in Canada was driving as an incorporated driver. In Ontario, we're talking about 53,000 incorporated versus 63,000 employees. So that's a ratio of 45% in Ontario. That's 1 in 2 people driving a truck in Canada, in Ontario, who's incorporated versus employees. In Quebec, it's 11,000 incorporated versus 47,000 employees. So in Quebec, it's about 1 in 5. So again, the issue resides in Ontario. But if we look at the data in 2023, 215,000 jobs trucking jobs in Canada. In 2025, there were about 209,000, and we lost thousands of jobs in 2 years. These jobs are being lost in the trucking sector because companies are having to close their doors. They can't keep their doors open, and businesses who are following the rules are being forced to use this new system, and this undermines working conditions. If we look, there were 123 companies that had to close. In 2024, 424. So that's a significant increase. So 78% of accidents in Quebec are linked to Drivers Inc. drivers. The association are the ones that have to go to the site of these accidents, and there are millions of dollars in bills that aren't being paid because we're trying to cut costs, exploit immigrants, not pay bills. And so for $3.8 million of unpaid bills. So if we look at foreign workers now, there are over 43,000 of temporary foreign workers that were awarded in trucking in the last few years. That's a lot. 43,000 just for trucking. And when we look at total data, that's quite significant. And we were able to receive some documents through the committee, the Transport Committee, correspondence between Employment and Social Development Canada and the program for temporary foreign workers. They had noticed that 114 employers were users of the temporary foreign workers program. So that means of 149 that used the Drivers Inc., there were 114 that used temporary foreign workers, even though that is not permitted. When you're hiring temporary foreign workers, they need to be salaried workers and not subcontracted. They are clearly disadvantaged in this situation, but 67% of these businesses that were caught used that system. The government has been aware of this situation for years. The trucking industry flagged this. The American government also raised the alarm. Unions did as well, but nothing has changed. Why? And we're asking the question. And that's why I brought up this matter here, because there were issues with Canada Post regarding the use of Drivers Inc. drivers. Through access to information requests, we've noticed that millions of dollars were taken by the WSIB for premiums between 2019 and 2024, hundreds of millions of dollars of undeclared wages, and it's an issue throughout Canada and in Ontario. There are organizations who wouldn't want things to change. They want this system to remain so they can continue abusing people, and the government decided to implement a pilot project in 2021. ESDC created this project and surveyed businesses in Ontario to see whether or not it was an issue. 60% of businesses were non-compliant. 60% of those in Ontario were not compliant. In the economic statement of 2022, they talked about $26 million over 5 years to fight the issue, and that this funding would be given to ESDC. Good news, you would think, but what we got for information in 2022 was that there would be further updates in future budgets. And what happened? In 2023, there was a budget, and 2024, and up until 2025, there was nothing, no follow-ups. There was only T4A that we saw in the fall, thanks to pressure that we put on the government. So following the economic statement in 2022, there was some lobbying. There was a gala foundation, a big party called CTOA, Canada Trucking Operators Association. They invited a bunch of Liberal members. If you look at the photos from 2023, they quickly reacted to the 2022 economic statement because Liberals like Ikra Khalid, George Tahal, Maninder Sinu, Ruby Sahoda, Richie Valdez, Daliwak, and there were definitely others who were present. Those are the ones that I could identify in the gala photos. Being at a gala doesn't necessarily incriminate someone. It's just showing that there's lobbying, that somebody is trying to influence you. But when you see so many Liberal members at a launch like this, we could ask questions and want to dig deeper. So we wanted to see who's behind CTOA. Who are those businesses, those organizations? In digging, we found Kapao Communication, and they communicated publicly for the CTOA, which supports the Drivers Inc. model, and they agree that this is a good system, that it's positive, regardless of the information that I already gave. There's HK United Trucks, Airman Transport, Cogias Transport, Sun Transportation System, GBE Rand Express, McFreights, Sendu Air and Ocean Land, United Group of Companies, Truck Solutions. There's a spokesperson close to the Prime Minister. There's a representative from a different organization. And so when we dug into the people who are the main shareholders and directors, they were all part of the CTOA, a company that is lobbying for the defense of Truckers Inc. What do they all have in common? They are almost all donors to the Liberal Party. I don't know if that's a coincidence, but it seems to raise certain questions. There was an article in the Journal de Montréal in December, $85,000 in donations from people from the CTOA. And with new information that we were able to obtain, there was over $100,000 in donation. So what are the businesses that are part of CTOA? Are these reliable groups? Can they guarantee good, safe work? One of the organizations, Armen Transport, was part of an accident on the Highway 30 in 2022, and Nancy Lefrançois, 42, and her son, 11 years old, died. The driver fled to the United States after the accident. After fleeing to the United States, or rather he fled to India, but then was found in the United States and he was extradited. Apologies, Mr. Barsalou Duval. Just before I give you the floor, I know that Mr. Hanley has a call at 5 o'clock, and I'm going to let Mr. Hanley go.
I do understand that you have a commitment at 5 o'clock that you have to be to. So I'm going to dismiss you at this point, but I would invite you, sir, to either provide a brief to the committee or we are going to continue this study in September. I can invite you back if you like, okay? Point of order, Ms. Jagger.
Can we just hear from the witness how long he actually can stay for? Because I do have questions that I would like.
Okay, well, my
respected.
understanding was 5 o'clock.
I'm supposed to be on a call at 5 o'clock. I mean, if I need to be 10 or 15 minutes late, I
Okay,
could be.
that's fine. I'll give you that option. Thank you. Okay, good. Continuez, Monsieur Barsalou Duval.
Go ahead, Mr. Barsalou Duval. One moment.
To go through a round of questions out of respect for our witness who maybe has another 10 minutes, and then we can resume debate for as long as Mr. Barsalou Duval would like to.
I mean, he has the floor right now. If there is unanimous consent among the committee, I guess we can go through one round. Monsieur Duval, Barsalou Duval, c'est
Monsieur
votre
le Président,
choix.
j'ai pas de...
Chair, I don't object. I just don't want to lose my turn. because I think that it's an important topic.
Understanding is that Mr. Duval will have the floor when we return. I'm going to accept that. Mr. Hanley, you good with that? So what that'll do is it'll give us about 12 and a half more minutes, if that's okay. All right? Okay. So do I have unanimous consent for the proposal from Mr. Alsut? Okay. C'est correct? Avec la après, no,
And you'll get the floor back after the round of questions.
I've got now on the list Mr. Cooper, followed by Ms. Chagger et M. Barcelot-Duval, si tu veux, pour 2 minutes 30 secondes.
If you want 2.5 minutes after that? No? Okay.
Mr. Cooper, go ahead, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Hanley. I certainly concur with your position on sponsored travel and agree that what is key is transparency and public disclosure. Now, with that said, is it your position that the disclosure requirements that were in place before the lobbying commissioner effectively interpreted her or issued a guidance around sponsored travel was sufficient?
I mean, we certainly think they were robust. We reported on the MP who was being sponsored, the amount or the cost of the trip that they were taking. So we think that was robust. And again, under the registry, anytime we're communicating with a designated public office holder, we're also reporting it. So if you had come on a delegation with us and suddenly we had 600 communications back and forth, that would be out there and transparent for people to see.
That was one of the concerns that the lobbying commissioner had expressed, what she characterized as a transparency gap insofar as lobbyists are not required to disclose if, in fact, they're engaging in lobbying while parliamentarians are on these types of delegations.
Sure. I think that when you're talking about any of these measures, again, it's risk mitigation. And so there's no way to get to zero risk. I think that for us, we believe that the previous regime was the right balance. And again, these are structured, transparent, and nonpartisan programs. We're not advocating for funding generally. This year, in the face of a massive wave of anti-Semitism, was sort of an exception to that rule. So we think it's a bit of a solution in search of a problem.
The other concern, in line with what the lobbying commissioner characterized as a transparency gap, was that there was no requirement for lobbyists to declare that they had previously hosted a parliamentarian on a sponsored trip and then thereafter lobbied them. Is that something that should be closed, or do you not see it as a gap in transparency?
I mean, I think it's a matter of public record who has gone on a sponsored trip and then who has been lobbied thereafter. So, no.
And what do you say in response to the commissioner's overriding position, which is that sponsored travel reasonably creates an expectation or a sense of obligation?
Again, we disagree. We take great care and pain to put together structured, transparent, nonpartisan programs. There are no conditions attached, no expectation of alignment, and all subsequent engagements already governed by the Lobbying Act and reporting requirements. So the issue here isn't influence, it's whether parliamentarians are allowed to access high-quality information and experience that help them do their jobs. And again, the will of Parliament has been to say that they would like to be able to have that. And again, I think that is the central issue that we're looking at here, which is the framework overriding the will of Parliament.
Okay. And how many delegations did CIJA sponsor of parliamentarians on an annual basis on average? How many parliamentarians would participate?
I don't know the answer to that off the top of my head. And I'm only back to CIJA. I worked there many years ago, about 7 months ago. But it would be a few trips with 8 to 12 individuals a year would be my best guess. We can get a more specific answer if you like.
And now it's zero.
Now it's zero. I mean, this is one of the considerations. Also, you know, there's been an ongoing series of wars over the last few years that have made it very difficult to travel.
Thank you, Mr. Cooper. Mr. Al-Sood, I understand you're next, and you'll be sharing your time with Ms. Chagger for 5 minutes. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Hanley, thank you for being with us today. I have no doubt that you and I likely don't see eye to eye on absolutely everything. I also, however, have no doubt that just as I do mine, you proudly represent your community. To do that, it's incredibly important that you be able to engage that community and that they feel they can engage with you should they wish to do so. Stringent registration regulations, as proposed by the Commissioner, I fear would do the opposite of that, would disable constituents, would disable Canadians from feeling they can engage with parliamentarians, but also community organizations with confidence. I trust that we have the following in common. We want to hear from those we represent. We want them to come to us when they have thoughts, concerns, or questions, and we don't want them to feel like their system is working against them. Could you speak to us about grassroots lobbying, its importance to the work that you do, and what stringent regulations pertaining to registration might mean for you, community organizations like CJA and CCM, and the numerous others who represent Canadian communities?
Sure. I'd wholeheartedly agree that we have that in common and worry about, especially in terms of community organizations, nonprofits, charitable organizations, and civil society, and their ability to come and have their voices heard without the chilling effect of being told that they're going to have to register as lobbyists. And I think that, again, what may be intended as trying to prevent harm is going to do more harm. And again, it is, what's the adage, you know, using a sledgehammer to hammer something in that's much smaller. I agree, and I think it's important for MPs as well that are here to be able to hear from community groups across the country. Obviously, I represent a community, and I'm sure all of you are in touch with your own constituents, but to be able to hear from groups across the country that may come from other ridings or other jurisdictions. It's very important.
Thank you, Mr. Hanley. I turn to Ms. Bardish.
Hi, Mr. Hanley. Thanks, Chair. Thank you so much. And so sorry, but thank you. So we have just under 3 minutes. We can go as quickly as possible. Can you just let me know what's your experience with the Lobbying Act and the code, even though we're primarily here for the Act, but what's your experience?
I think that we as an organization and me as an individual follow the rules and regulations very stringently. I think that Jewish community organizations in general, I mean, I think the Jewish community is a community of rule followers. So we strive to be in, well, we don't just strive, we ensure that we're in full compliance at all times. I think parts of it can be a little bit arduous, but I think the transparency aspects of it are good and important in a democracy. Again, I think that where you have the will of parliamentarians being overridden, I think that's a challenge, and I think you folks have agency. I think in our system of government, Parliament is supposed to reign supreme.
The Commissioner of Lobbying has proposed harmonizing the filing deadline for both consultant and in-house lobbyists to 10 days. Do you find that reasonable, or would you have an alternative recommendation?
Well, the administrative assistants in my organization that are chasing me for my stuff would probably have concerns about it. I think that what's there now is reasonable. I'm not sure the arguments made for making it more stringent, and I think that what's there now allows information to be out in a timely fashion. And again, I mean, this isn't the only job I've had in advocacy, and it's a very accessible system. You can see who's been up to what when in a pretty quick fashion.
Thank you. And could you speak to us about recommendation 4, which addresses registration requirements in relation to the awarding of grants and contributions?
So I can't pretend to be able to recall exactly what the substance of it is. It wasn't one of the recommendations that we pulled out as a challenge, okay. But I don't know if you want to
No, I'm going to continue because I know that CEJA is a registered lobbying group. So that's
Yeah.
what you do. I know that I've got a very active Jewish community in the Waterloo region, in the city of Waterloo, the riding of Waterloo. Synagogues and so forth are not lobbyists. They want to work with government. They want to work with community. And so could you help me just differentiate between what you do and what they do?
So, I mean, synagogues are independent. They are their own, they have their own agency. Obviously, we connect with them. We connect with different rabbis from across the country. We represent Jewish federations across the country, which are sort of like the United Way in the Jewish community, which again are connected into synagogues, but slightly separate from them. And again, we are advocates for the community, the paid advocates for the community. Rabbis are different. I mean, they definitely are advocates for the community, as you well know. But yeah,
Okay,
I don't know
thank
the
you.
distinction you're looking for.
Thank you, Mr. Hanley, Ms. Jagger. Mr. Hanley, I want to thank you for appearing before the committee today. If, as an afterthought, you have any other things that you'd like to submit to the committee, please do so through the clerk. At the present time, we're going to continue on with avec la motion qui a été proposée par M. Barcelo-Duval.
The motion moved by Mr. Barcelo-Duval. The floor is yours. Thank you, Chair. So I was explaining businesses who work with the CTOA that supports the Drivers Inc. Model and the accident on Highway 30. And they were also a part of a train derailing in last January, where two trucks decided to park on the railroad, and this led to an accident that could have been fatal for the drivers and for the passengers. There were 2 gun-related incidents in 2025-2026. Again, we don't know the reason for that, but that's not the kind of situation that's going to bring trust. I spoke about other businesses like Cogies Transport that was caught with for $3.9 million with the WSIB for unpaid wages. There were people who were incarcerated at another organization because the trucks were going to be seized and changed the serial numbers on his trucks in the middle of the night. Sun Transportation Systems is another company. It offers illegal truck driving courses, and Air and Ocean Land. They also offer illegal trucking courses. What is that? Well, you arrive in a farming land, a land that isn't approved for use, and you put your trucks there. And it's a significant problem in certain regions in Ontario. In Caledon, and last time I looked, there's 72 trucking lots, and the city needs to fight against those organizations. This is not a joke. What was the government response? As I mentioned, in 2022, in the economic statement, the government indicated that it was going to be sending money to ESDC. But through the Transport Committee, we obtained documents. So we fought for months for the production of documents, correspondence with different departments. And among those correspondence, on February 7, 2023, the Cabinet received a document on the impacts of Drivers Inc., and members raised the following concerns. These concerns were that the government was not fighting against the Drivers Inc. model. A lot of members thought that it wasn't an issue and that they should be focused on other problems and that it wasn't a priority. And so the Liberal caucus was not looking to change anything. Is it because of CTOA lobbying? We don't know. That said, on May 23rd, 2023, so a little time later, there was a meeting with the Minister, and Iquinder Gahir was part of that meeting, and the Minister of Labour committed to no longer using the term Drivers Inc. and to ensure that there would be no repression and that there would be education measures. So they were just going to say that you need to follow the rules, but there would be no consequences. That was the minister's commitment at that time. That was a communique that was shared by C2OA following the meeting, and it was included in the production of documents that we obtained at the Transport Committee, which indicates that it was an internal communication to say that we cannot talk about Drivers Inc. Furthermore, as I mentioned, Chair, a lot of organizations have called out this problem. Unions, associations, the Canadian Trucking Association, the Quebec Association of Trucking, they all asked to meet with government. And it was very difficult to achieve any kind of results, and it was difficult in many cases to have meetings. But the CTOA has privileged access in a way. One of the documents that we received indicates that there was a meeting with the Prime Minister directly on October 25th, 2024. So Mr. Trudeau, who was Prime Minister at the time, met with the organization. And I can say that no trucking association, no legitimate trucking association was able to meet with the Prime Minister through his office. Unfortunately, and I said that we asked for a production of documents at the Transport Committee and we voted on it. But strangely, the Prime Minister's office was part of the production of documents, but the Prime Minister's office said that they had no documents to give us. Strange, especially knowing that there was a meeting between the Prime Minister's office and the CTOA, and yet they had no documents to share. There was an email from the PMO, from the Prime Minister's office, writing to the Transport Department to see whether or not they could give a briefing on the topic, but yet they have no documents to share. Why would the Prime Minister's office not have any documents to share? That's a question that I'm asking, and perhaps we'll get a response when the Liberals have the floor. And what are the results of the Liberal action on this file? 3/4 of the time, fines are unpaid. Offenses at ESDC, and we look at data on their website, we can see that when payments ordered are emitted and fines are given, most businesses comply. But for those that don't comply, those are the trucking companies. If we look at the data, when we compile the data for these unpaid fines, they all come from the trucking sector. It's interesting to see that flying under the radar. And there are employees at ESDC that are complaining. There was a report made by researchers from 2022, and it states, or it includes, employees of ESDC decrying the situation, saying that they can't work within the system anymore. 80% of their complaints had to do with the trucking sector. We're playing cat and mouse. They were playing cat and mouse with these companies that don't even respond to their calls. And they felt like they were being laughed at. Employees were being exploited. Immigrants were threatened regarding removing amounts from their salary. People who are not paid for years. They were so discouraged, Chair. Some are no longer motivated to work. And I'm not inventing anything. This is researchers carried this out and published a report that you can consult. We organized a press conference last fall with the Trucking Association from Quebec, and we worked with the Trucking Association of Canada, the union from Teamster, and we proposed an investigation eliminating the right for temporary foreign workers to be incorporated and having an assessment in the 18 months of the creation of a new trucking company that it needed to be looked into by ESDC and have offenses throughout Canada, because currently if there's an offense in Ontario, well, in Quebec, we're not aware of it. And if there's an offense in Quebec, well, we don't know that there was an offense in Saskatchewan, so there could be never-ending offenses without ever being caught. And then as soon as there are too many issues, then you swap provinces. We proposed a registry for insurance, because there are many that are driving with no insurance, and when they're caught, they just give false documents, insurance that was canceled. They're driving with no insurance. So a public registry, creating a certification program for employers in order for them to have temporary foreign workers, so that we can catch them before they exploit those temporary foreign workers. They have to stop bringing these temporary foreign workers and making them work in slave-like conditions. These companies need to be assessed beforehand in order to avoid these issues that are too common in the trucking industry, making the T4A mandatory. So of all those 10 recommendations, only one was implemented by government. There was the member from Argenteuil-La Petite Nation who shared falsehoods and stalled the work at Tran and accused me of fundraising on the issue or making money on the issue. And so those issues at Tran persisted up until December 9th, until there was a story published in the Journal de Montréal, until we heard that there was someone who became spokesperson for CTOA who was close to the Prime Minister, who supported the Prime Minister's election, who has participated for years, Mr. Doulat, and the lobbying group for Drivers Inc. managed to get close to the Prime Minister. He was even there for the swearing-in. And you don't invite just anybody to a swearing-in. We don't invite 500 people to our swearing-in. Usually it's a small private room, and he was in the first row. That's not nothing, Chair. And now that person becomes spokesperson for Drivers Inc. And Carney's office, following the request for information, said that there was no information to give us, even though it was a constitutional obligation. When a committee makes the request for the production of documents, it's a constitutional right for committees to have access to that information, and the Prime Minister's office did not meet those constitutional obligations because they did not give us the information, even though it is clear that they have information, given what I have explained up until now. Chair, I am very concerned. There's continuing interference. MPs made briefing requests from the Labour Minister accusing the government of targeting specific people, and yet in the data what we see is the opposite. ESDC targets businesses that are not compliant, and there's data on non-compliance that says that in Canada about 40% of businesses are not compliant. In Ontario, it's about 63%. So this is a significant problem. And what I find fascinating in such a situation is that there's a chair at the Transport Committee. We had witnesses around the table, including the chair of the committee who was there, and some said that they have family members who died. People have died. People came close to dying because of accidents. And we had businesses who said that these issues are leading them to bankruptcy in Ontario, in Canada. For so many businesses, this is a matter of whether or not they will be bankrupt if these other Drivers Inc. businesses are able to operate. And yet, the chair of the Transport Committee went to a party organized by the Association of Drivers Inc., knowing exactly who was going to be there. I can't understand how the chair of the Transport Committee would have the audacity to participate in such a party. I raised the issue at the Transport Committee, and I was not able to talk about it. And since then, the committee has been in camera. For the last 2 months, the committee has been in camera, so that I can't talk about this, so that I can't raise the issue regarding what the chair of the Transport Committee was doing at a Drivers Inc. party. I have a hypothesis, Chair. There's a business based in his riding, which is likely a member of the CTOA. It's called Safex, and they were present at that party that I mentioned. The business was implicated in a lot of accidents, and there was a victim of one of those accidents that testified in committee. This person almost died. I did some research, and I found a case at the administrative tribunal. An employee spoke neither English nor French. So a truck driver, I don't know if he was an employee or if he was an incorporated driver, but at that tribunal, it states in the document that the person could speak neither English nor French. So I wonder what kind of business hires truck drivers who can't speak either English or French. That business, as I mentioned, was also implicated in an accident involving Miss Claudia Boucher. That business, on January 23rd, 2026, was part of a significant accident in New Brunswick. One of its trucks was filmed driving in the opposite direction on Highway 20. And on May 8th, 2026, there was a video on social media. You could see it throughout Quebec and Canada because people found it funny, but it wasn't that funny. This truck was driving through Drummondville on the Boulevard Saint-Joseph, and there were shopping carts that were coming out of the back of it. So they must have hit a bunch of people and cars, and when you look at the videos and the photos, the driver was wearing a SafeX vest. And if you dig a little deeper regarding SafeX, and I'm focused on that because when you look at the registry of businesses in Quebec, you can see that SafeX is registered for having 50 to 99 employees. When you look at US DOT in the United States, the business states that it has over 200 trucks. So I don't know who's driving those additional 100 trucks, unless it's the Drivers Inc. system. And the business seems to be associated with the CTOA, as seen in the photos where Mr. Shifke was present. It's also interesting to note that shareholders for SafeX, and I went to see if they were also Liberal donors, Raminder Deep Singh, and another shareholder, two partners. The other is Amin Deep Singh. Both donated more than $25,000 to the Liberal Party over the years. So, the transport chair being at that party, I don't know if he was innocently invited or if it was to please a generous Liberal donor because that business is located in his riding. I asked the question, but he did not want to answer. Victims wrote to the chair of the Transport Committee. They complained. They said that it made no sense. We just testified that we have lost our loved ones, and then there you are hanging out with Drivers Inc. representatives, and unfortunately, the chair did not want to be accountable in committee or at the House of Commons. And now that the committee is in camera, we can't talk about it. The chair of the Transport Committee responded on behalf of the committee to the victims, and I found that interesting and strange. I looked into the rules of the House, and given the House of Commons procedures, what it says is that the chair can direct the work of the committee. That's the role of the chair, Chapter 20, Paragraph 31. But when you look a little further, if those actions don't lead to any complaints from committee members, and if the chair has the implicit consent of the chair of the committee. Now, did the chair have that consent? I don't think so. Unfortunately, we can't know where things are at. We don't know if he acted in a proper manner. I think how he acted was unfortunate, especially given what we heard at the committee. I think it shows a significant lack of judgment, and it discredits the work carried out by the committee that was supposed to shed a light on the issues being faced in the transport industry. And so we have a chair that is discrediting our work and shows a lack of judgment. I hope, and that's my concern, I hope that it's not because one of his generous donors invited him to the party, because that would be embarrassing, Chair. We need to work for Canadians, and unfortunately, that doesn't seem to be the case here. There's lobbying here funding the Liberal government. We're seeing lobbying that is done everywhere. And lobbying that is not being registered. I sent in a complaint to the lobbying commissioner regarding the spokesperson of the CTOA, and that organization was not registered. And yet, they say that they are following measures that have been put in place up until now. Does this justify an investigation? I think it does. I think that the situation is quite serious. And instead of wanting to solve the problem, the government is trying to hide the facts, doesn't want us to talk about it, is keeping us from talking about it. And I think that's why we have to shed a light. We started a study at the Transport Committee. We wanted to look in depth at the Drivers Inc. issue. And it's not only a road safety issue and an issue with Drivers Inc. There's also an issue with proximity with the government and interference. And I think that it would be up to this committee to carry out the necessary study to see whether or not there are ties with the government. I think these ties are clear, but I think it would be relevant to hear from individuals that are making these contributions to the Liberal Party, who are part of CTOA, who are pushing for Drivers Inc. It would be relevant to hear from the chair of the Transport Committee and representatives from the Prime Minister's office. Why is it that they have no information when other departments have correspondence that includes the Prime Minister's office? How is it that the Labour Minister said that you can't talk about Drivers Inc. anymore, that it's a taboo topic? I think that's quite problematic. If you want to solve a problem, you have to take the bull by the horns instead of hiding. And so this doesn't help us trust the government, and I think that some trust rebuilding needs to happen. People want to earn a living driving in safe conditions, because what we're hearing is trucking companies are saying that they're going to close their doors. Drivers who are saying they don't want to drive anymore, they don't want to die because of the dangerous situations. There are issues in the trucking sector that are not of federal jurisdiction, but I think that it is up to the federal government to look into the issues instead of leaving it to the provinces. The federal government has work to do in order to solve the problem. Unfortunately, they're being willfully blind, and it's important to see whether or not this blindness exists because of partisan considerations, or is it just a naivete that we need to focus on and solve. My request is that the Ethics Committee study the matter, and I hope that I will receive my colleagues' support. I hope I will receive support from the Liberal Party as well as the Conservative Party. We're focused on the Liberal Party here, but it's in the Liberal Party's best interest to carry out this study so that we know that they are in fact clean. Because if they have nothing to hide, they'll want to solve the Drivers' Inc. problem. They'll want to explain why there are so many ties between their party and the companies that support that model. Perhaps it's only a few individuals. Perhaps that lobbying led to no results. But I doubt it. I think that we need to reestablish some integrity here, especially in the perception that Canadians might have. And we need to focus on transparency. And so, Chair, that concludes my remarks, but I could, of course, have spoken to you at length for hours about this. If those across the room are disappointed, well, hopefully they vote in favor of the motion so we can change things. Thank you, Mr. Barcelot-Duval. Mr. Hardy on the motion. Thank you, Chair. This is not a motion that we were expecting to deal with today, but I listened to what was said attentively. There were a lot of things that had to do with the Drivers' Inc. phenomenon. This is something that would be up to the Transport Committee, but there are a lot of elements that would be relevant for our committee. So I'm going to go through that motion and I'll give you some of the notes regarding certain elements that I think should be looked at here. When we're talking about the Canada Truck Operators Association, and we see that it's the only organization in the trucking industry that doesn't want to share information and they support Drivers Inc. Well, at the Ethics Committee, we often see that documents that we don't want to share documents, but witnesses and commissioners have said to us that we need more transparency. So when an organization like this one doesn't want to share any information, well, that raises a red flag. And we see then the ties with the Liberal Party. That also could be problematic. And the CTOA is not registered for lobbying. We're currently looking at the review of the Lobbying Act, and we're seeing that they're hosting events with ministers and MPs, and the commissioner's not aware of it? What's going on? That's another problem. And we have a role to play as elected officials. We have to flag any potential issues and be aware of potential conflicts of interest and not participate in certain events. Now, at the Transport Committee, many elected officials participated in public lobbying activities. And we've heard that the chair of the Transport Committee, who is supposed to ensure that the committee carries out its work, is also participating in events hosted by that company that doesn't want to share information. Also, interesting to find out that they are organizing in-camera meetings. That's to hide things. That's not to make things transparent. I think it's important to bring back into the equation. If we want Canadians and Quebecers to trust our institutions, we need to be transparent. They need to have access to information. Last week, we were here with the Minister of Finance. We asked to have access to his recusal. The Liberals voted against it. That's what's problematic for Canadians. We don't have access to information. We're just asking to access this information. Knowing that the CTOA had access to the Prime Minister directly, and that the new person representing the CTOA was at the swearing-in of the new Prime Minister, well, you see that there's a friendship there. There are ties there. Everyone who we speak to, police officers are sharing that it's a problem. In Montmorency, Charlevoix, there are some hills, and police officers tell me that Drivers Inc. drivers are always stopped on the side. Their brakes are finished. They don't know how to drive in my riding. So it's an issue throughout Canada. There are families who are saying that there's a problem. The industry is saying there's a problem. But for reasons unknown, there is no there's no end to this problem. Things are being blocked, and we're finding out that there are people who are close to that CTOA who are giving money to the Liberal Party. That's a problem. That's a problem for our ethics committee. I took some notes. 78% of accidents are linked to these Drivers Inc. drivers on our roads. I believe my colleague, police officers, have said to me that it's often those kinds of drivers. And those who are enforcing roadside rules have asked to be armed because of the problem. There have been significant losses in sales in Quebec. 6,000 jobs lost in a few years. We're in a Liberal recession, obviously. And people are having a hard time making ends meet and paying for gas and groceries. And now there's a business model that's being clearly supported by the Liberals that is causing even more Canadians and Quebecers to lose their jobs. I want competition. It's good for Canadians. They pay less when there's competition. But you're not supposed to have disloyal and illegal competition, and that's what we're dealing with now. 8 out of 10 are negatively impacted. This is the industry that is asking for change. And the only organization that doesn't want to do anything is the one that's buddy-buddy with the Liberal Party. So it's a political debate. It's a debate on transparency. The government is dragging its feet. And they're letting things go. And letting things go is leading to deaths. And we often talk about the victims' rights in Parliament. When are we going to hear from victims? When are they going to be able to express themselves? And when are we going to create laws to protect them? And why would we create laws? And we saw that with C-16. Why create legislation if there's going to be a loophole? You can say that you're tough on crime, but if there's a big loophole, you're not that tough. So I think it's important to carry out this study for this business that is lobbying, that is not registered. It's lobbying the Liberal Party. There's a direct cause and effect. The Prime Minister's office doesn't want to disclose documents. We saw that last week. We're seeing it again today. It's a lack of transparency. The motion is logical. The committee needs to shed a light on the ethical problem linked to Drivers Inc. No information being shared from the Prime Minister's office, that's serious. And having committees in camera, very interesting considering it's such an important study that Canadians are not being given the opportunity to hear what's going on. Thank you, Mr. Hardy. Ms. Chagger.
By Mr. Barrett.
Thank you, Chair. So I want to just begin by acknowledging that we stand with survivors and victims of exploitation through this trucking model. But let me be clear, misclassification is illegal, and that's why the government is taking decisive action to stop it. Through Budget 2025, the government is investing $77 million over 4 years for the Canada Revenue Agency to crack down on employers who misclassify employees. The government lifted the moratorium on T4A penalties in the trucking industry as a part of a series of targeted measures to combat misclassification. In doing so, we are building on the work that has been done over the last number of years to protect workers, ensure employers are responsible for their actions, and preserving the status of true independent contractors. The government continues to monitor this progress closely, but for meaningful change to occur, the provinces and territories also have to do their part by continuing to work collaboratively with the government on education, inspection, and enforcement. The baseless accusations that MP Barcelou Duval is making against colleagues and the government do not support survivors or victims of the Drivers Inc. model. But I will share what does. Supporting measures that were in Budget 2025. However, the Bloc, like the Conservatives, proudly voted against these measures and others included in Budget 2025. Mr. Chair, I am sitting here, as we know, I think every committee have had the opportunity to share how important this committee is and how we have a lot of work to do. I know my constituents in the riding of Waterloo. I know Canadians expect this committee to function. Hearing the comments of Mr. Barcelou Duval and Mr. Hardy, I wonder if there should be a committee that oversees committees, because it seems like whenever somebody's upset with what happened at their committee, now they come to this committee. But the House of Commons Standing Committee on Access to Information, Privacy and Ethics studies, and it's stated, under Standing Order 108-3H, the committee's mandate is to study matters related to reports of the Office of the Information Commissioner of Canada, the Office of the Privacy Commissioner of Canada, the Office of the Commissioner of Lobbying of Canada, and the Office of Conflict of Interest and Ethics Commissioner, pursuant to the Conflict of Interest Act. And then it explains what should go to PROC and others. And what I've noticed is members on this committee use, the word ethics or lobbying, and they use whatever definition they want and believe it all of a sudden becomes relevant to the mandate of this committee, which is really unfortunate. And I'll be very honest that I did expect the stunt from the Conservatives. Was really disappointed to see the Bloc member play this in front of a witness who was coming. We know that it's been challenging times. We've got people who are gainfully employed, taxpayers coming, giving their time to committee after we've asked them to come. I was not a member of the committee when the name of CJA was provided. For example, last week we had similar shenanigans, I guess, taking place where somebody comes to our committee, they have work to do, they have other commitments, and then all of a sudden it feels like opposition parties believe that these people who have accepted our invitation to come, time is not as valuable as ours. And I think that's disrespectful, because we also have other witnesses who we want to have come and who've not accepted our invitation. And it's probably because they're seeing the way they're treated. People know that if they come to Parliament Hill, they might not leave after their hour appointment because, well, somebody just might want to change the agenda. And so for the Conservatives to do it, it's just kind of become normal. The Bloc, even though I love my country with 10 provinces, 3 territories, I know the Bloc wants to separate our country, my country. That's the one thing I usually disagree. But usually when it comes to decorum and following rules, they're pretty clear as to where they stand, and they often are a productive caucus, but it appears that Mr. Barcelou Duval has demonstrated perhaps the true intentions of the Bloc, and it's really disappointing because last week I was the last spot in the rounds. It was confirmed that after myself, the witness would be released and we would be going on to committee business. And so I had preemptively gotten the conversation on committee business going, and the Bloc member that day was really quick to come and pull me aside and confront me and say, how dare you take away my speaking slot? And I said, no, you can speak to the chair, you can speak to members. I was the final slot. You did not have a slot after me. Please confirm. Because I wouldn't do that. Because I think most of us come to committee prepared. We come to ask questions. And that's where I would just say that I was disappointed that the Bloc member last week would not want me to do that. But today, the Bloc member had no trouble trying to override the questions I had prepared that other members had prepared. And so I think it's really disrespectful, and I would encourage Bloc members to not take that approach. And I know they are really close to the Conservatives. Sometimes you can't tell them apart. But I would let the Conservatives do what they're doing, because some of us have to really be trying to get some work done on Parliament Hill, and clearly it's not the official opposition. So I'm just looking at the notice of meeting that the chair was kind enough to provide to us at the end of the workday on Friday. It said from 4:30 to 5:30 we'd be studying committee business, which was resuming the debate on the motion moved by Michael Barrett on Thursday, April 26th, and I think we should respect the fact that that's the approach and the agenda that we had in front of us. So with that, I have basically no other choice, Mr. Chair, than to move to adjourn. Adjourn this debate.
Okay, so Ms. Chagger has moved a motion to adjourn debate, which is a non-debatable motion, and what that effectively means for people watching at home is that she is shutting down debate on this issue. Madam Clerk, please take the roll. Thank you.
The vote is on the motion that the debate be adjourned. Mr. Alsoud? Yes. Ms. Chagger?
Please.
Mr. Chang?
Yes.
Ms. Church?
Yes.
Madame Lapointe?
Oui.
Mr. Barrett?
No.
Mr. Cooper?
No.
Monsieur Hardy?
Nope.
Monsieur Barsalou-Duval?
No.
Yeas 5, nays 4.
Okay, so the motion to adjourn debate is adopted. Before I go to Mr. Barrett on the resumption of the sub-amendment that we were left debating, I need from the committee an adoption of a study budget in relation to the connection between the Minister of Finance, National Revenue, and Alto. That study budget was $200. Do I have unanimous consent for that study budget? Okay. Okay, thank you. So that's been approved, Madam Clerk. There's the signed copy. And then, Mr. Barrett, we're on your sub-amendment, which was the Prime Minister's Conflict of Interest screen has been applied, given that the Conflict of Interest Commissioner has advised the Prime Minister against learning of when his screen has been applied until a decision has been finalized and made public. Such decisions shall be shared after this point, subject to any limitations or privileges that may apply, such as national security or cabinet competence, and by adding the following, require that the Privy Council office to provide the committee as necessary any updates to the assessment process for applying to the Prime Minister's Conflict of Interest screen. That's the sub-amendment that you've proposed. We're on that. Mr. Barrett, go ahead, please.
Chair, we've spent a few minutes and a few meetings discussing this matter, and I think that it's important that before we find ourselves in recess until September, that we allow this transparency mechanism to move forward. We've seen that there is some willingness around the table to do it, but in spite of our attempts to seek a compromise, some of the important pieces of this motion have been removed. But we don't want perfect to be the enemy of the good, and I would like the motion to pass today. So, assuming that all members around the table, even the Liberals, are in favor of this transparency mechanism, let's get it to a vote.
Okay, Mr. Barrett, I've got nobody else on the list, so we're on the sub-amendment from Mr. Barrett. I'm going to ask the clerk to, first of all, do I have unanimous consent on the sub-amendment? Yes. For Michael Barrett's sub-amendment to the motion? To go to a vote. Do I have unanimous consent for the sub-amendment? To approve the to go to a vote? So you want it to go to a vote? Okay, go ahead. Okay, go ahead, Madam Clerk, on Mr. Barrett's sub-amendment.
Sub-amendment by Mr. Barrett. Mr. Alsoud?
No.
Ms. Chagger?
No, thank you.
Mr. Chang?
No.
Ms. Church? No. Madame Lapointe?
No.
Mr. Barrett?
Yes.
Mr. Cooper,
Yes.
Monsieur Hardy,
Oui.
Monsieur Barcelou-Duval.
Oui.
Yeas 4, nays 5.
Okay, so, thank you, Madam Clerk. The sub-amendment is defeated. We're now on the amendment of Ms. Chagger, which was proposed on Monday, May 25th. I'm not going to read it. I think all members have it. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing no discussion on the amendment, do we have unanimous consent to accept the amendment? They would like a recorded division. Okay. Madam Clerk,
But
on the
the chair
sub-amendment,
insisted.
on the sub-amendment, please. Or, sorry, on the amendment, sorry.
So the vote is on the amendment. Mr. Alsoud,
Oui.
Ms. Jagger,
Yes, please.
Mr. Chang,
Oui.
Ms. Church,
Yes.
Madame Lapointe,
Oui.
Mr. Barrett,
No.
Mr. Cooper,
No.
Monsieur Hardy,
No.
Monsieur Barcelou-Duval.
No.
Yeas 5, nays 4.
Okay, so the amendment is adopted. We're on the main motion as amended. Mr. Barrett, go ahead on the main motion as amended.
Chair, I'd like to move that the motion be amended in Part D by replacing Conflict of Interest and Ethics Commissioner with appropriate officials from the Privy Council office.
Would you, would you like to have Mr. Cooper amend the motion? Because it is your motion.
It was, you know what,
I
that was,
think
it was
that's what you
actually
were-
his idea.
That's what you're intending
It was
to
actually
do,
his
correct?
idea to do
Yes.
that, yeah.
And Mr. Cooper, because it was your idea, I'm going to ask that you amend the motion, and if you want to make it similar to what Mr. Barrett proposed, I would certainly accept that. Go ahead.
Yeah, so the amendment is as follows, that the motion be amended by, in Part D, replacing Conflict of Interest and Ethics Commissioner with appropriate officials from the Privy Council office.
Here.
Very good. Very good.
Okay, so I think that's a fairly simple amendment. Any discussion on the amendment? I don't see any. Okay, Madam Clerk, on the amendment, if you can take the vote, please.
So on the amendment that Mr. Cooper just read, Mr. Alsoud,
No.
Ms. Jagger,
No, thank you.
Mr. Chang,
Nope.
Ms. Church.
No.
Madame Lapointe,
No?
Mr. Barrett,
Yes.
Mr. Cooper,
Yes.
Monsieur Hardy,
Oui.
Monsieur Barcelou-Duval.
Oui.
Yeas 4, nays 5.
Okay, so the amendment is defeated. We're now back on the main motion as amended. Any other discussion on that? Seeing none, we'll call. Go ahead, Mr. Barrett. Go ahead.
No,
Okay.
I just wonder if colleagues would give any consideration to removing Part D. And while I'm not able to move that amendment, would just like a further discussion of that potentiality.
Well, I mean, I can't accept that. I mean, if somebody wants to move that motion, well, I mean, you can have,
That the motion be amended by deleting Part D.
okay, the motion be deleted by amending Part D. That's Mr. Cooper's amendment to that. If you want to have a discussion, now would be the time, Mr. Barrett, on Mr. Cooper's amendment.
I'm satisfied with the outcome of the discussion.
Okay, that's great. On the amendment by Mr. Cooper, no further discussion. We're going to call the vote on that. Madam Clerk, please go ahead.
Mr. Alsoud,
No.
No.
On the main motion or on the on the
The
amendment?
amendment by Mr. Cooper is proposed just now.
No on the amendment.
Okay.
Ms. Jagger,
Just to clarify, removing the commissioner as a witness is,
Moving Part D.
which is the commissioner?
Right.
No, thank you. I think we need the commissioner.
Mr. Chang,
No, thank you.
Ms. Church?
No.
Madame Lapointe?
Non.
Mr. Barrett?
Yes.
Mr. Cooper?
Yes.
Monsieur Hardy?
Oui.
Monsieur Barcelou Duval?
Oui.
Yeas 4, nays 5.
Okay, so Mr. Cooper's, just hang on. Mr.
Point of order?
Cooper's motion as, or amendment is defeated. We're on the main motion as amended. On the main motion as amended,
Point of order.
go ahead with your point of order.
I just would like, and perhaps, Chair, you can confer with the clerk, when something's been added and has been adopted, it cannot be removed. Can it be removed? Because that was part of the amendment that was added. So it feels like that should have been out of order.
Okay, well, it was defeated, so, but,
I'd like to follow them.
Madam Clerk, if you want to clarify that, go ahead. If I erred in judgment, notwithstanding the fact that it was defeated, then I'll accept responsibility for that. But go ahead, Madam Clerk, if you want to, I mean, explanation.
You're right. Technically, when something is adopted, the committee cannot come back to its own decision. If there's unanimous consent and if people agree, then you can go with it.
So I didn't see any objection at the beginning of that, so I accepted it, but I accept responsibility for that. So we're on the main motion as amended. Any other discussion, main motion as amended? Seeing none, we're going to go to a vote on the main motion as,
Try and pass it unanimously.
you-
That was suggested earlier.
I'm going to go to a vote on this, Mr. Barrett. So let's go to the vote, Madam Clerk. Main motion as amended.
Main motion as amended. Mr. Alsud?
Yes.
Ms. Jagger?
Yes.
Mr. Chang?
Yes.
Ms. Church?
Yes.
Madame Lapointe?
Oui.
Mr. Barrett?
Oui.
Mr. Cooper?
Yes.
Monsieur Hardy?
Oui.
Monsieur Barcelou Duval?
Oui.
Yeas 9.
Okay, so the motion as amended is adopted. I have no other business. We'll see you all Thursday. Meeting adjourned.